Hello, guys. Welcome back to Building and Navigating Podcast, which is short for Building Resilience and Navigating the Journey with Multiple Sclerosis Together. Whew, even for me, it's a mouthful. Anyway, so this is episode 4 and a follow-up to my previous episode where I talked a little bit about some of my health traumas leading up to my MS diagnosis. So I talked a little bit more about surviving a pulmonary embolism. So for those of you who don't know, a pulmonary embolism is a blood clot in the lungs. So I have my phone here and I have a few notes just because it's a lot to cover. And as you know, with a brain injury, sometimes memory loss or memory gaps or brain fog may occur, so I just wanted to play it safe. So the first point I want to discuss is just my recuperation period from my pulmonary embolism. And the reason I just had a memory. So the reason I laughed a little bit was because it's like not even funny. There's a lot of dark humor sometimes I have, and I laugh about inappropriate things. But I think when you've been on the other side, sometimes I think we can be forgiven, right? I mean, yeah. So recuperating from my pulmonary embolism meant that I had to be on blood thinners because the clot burden was so huge. And like I mentioned in my previous video, the doctors were telling me, like, how did I survive? How did I manage to continue to be alive and survive that? Because the clot was huge like this. It was like huge. So I had to be on intense treatment. It was very painful. I was hospitalized for a few days and discharged, I think, 2 days before Christmas. And that was difficult. I had a lot of heavy, like just clot burden, but heaviness on my chest. So it felt like somebody was like pressing on my chest 24/7. I felt like I was sinking. I couldn't, reach over my head. So like right now I'm able to do this, but this is the most I was able to do. That was difficult. Breathing was just extra work for me. I had to learn how to breathe again properly through my diaphragm. So I had to let my diaphragm expand out when I'm inhaling, and then for it to go in when I'm exhaling. And that was just to help me to learn how to breathe again, but properly. Because a lot of the time, people don't realize that we don't breathe properly. So that was a hurdle that I got through. And I'm going to give you the fast track version just because it's really long. So what happened was I wasn't allowed to work as well. This was doctor's orders. Like my job literally was to eat and sleep. And I wasn't even allowed to work out because the clot burden was so heavy. So anything that I did was strenuous, when I say strenuous, like everything, just even walking was difficult. Breathing was difficult. Moving around was difficult. Like I even had to learn how to walk again. Everything was deconditioned. My body was constricted. My muscles were so tight. Like, I don't know. It was really tough. And I remember everything being so difficult in my life. And yeah, that was very, like, sometimes when I'm speaking upon these topics, it's like a flashback. Sometimes the memory will just come back to me and I feel very uncomfortable. So excuse me, sometimes you see me do this or kind of like have to take a breath because it's a lot. Like I'm just like reliving that traumatic experience. And I'm sure I'm even forgetting some key information, but if it comes up, I will mention it randomly. So please forgive me for that. Okay. So come Christmas, and you know what? I will mention this later, but Yeah, I don't even remember Christmas. So yeah, that was difficult. Fast forward, it really put a lot of things into perspective for me at the time. Um, my now husband, he's been wanting to get married for the longest time. It's me. Like, a lot of ladies are in situations where they're waiting for their man to put a ring on it and stuff. Like, for me, it's the opposite. My man was like waiting for me to just like be open to it. But when, I will not lie, when I literally was on the other side and came back, it really put a lot of things into perspective. And it's not like I never wanted to get married. I just didn't feel I was ready. Or yeah, I don't know. I just didn't feel ready. I was ready in terms of, what it takes to be in a relationship, what it takes to be with somebody, and to receive a husband. And to be honest, I'm an alpha woman, so very like, Miss Independent. So if you're going to be in my life, it's because I want to share my life with you. So I wasn't in a rush to get married, but after experiencing, that trauma that almost took me out, I was open to the idea, and I was even questioning why it was like taking so long. So obviously I made my husband, or my fiance at the time, his dreams come true when he asked me to marry him. And this was, if I recollect, this was around Valentine's Day or 2 days after, I think. So a few months after experiencing that whole ordeal, I said yes. I don't remember it. So this is me just trying to recollect everything that has happened, but I do remember that, I got engaged. And fast forward, I had a traditional engagement. So when I say that, I'm from Ghana, and in Ghana, we have traditional engagement ceremonies, and it's where we wear our traditional attire. The two families come together. Typically, it's conducted, or the ceremony is done at the bride's family home. And so that's what happened for me. Don't remember it. So, so there's a lot of like reliving like the trauma of what happened to me, but a lot of like milestones and celebrations that happened the following year. And I don't have any recollection. So right now I'll look at like photos that were taken, the whole process, and I don't, like, the honest truth is I don't feel anything. It's not like I'm numb or anything to it. I just don't remember it. What I see are beautiful pictures of my family, my husband's family, myself, my husband. And I see it as like a beautiful couple. But I can't, like, even now as I'm speaking, I don't have any emotional attachment to the photos. The photos don't even trigger my memory of the day. What happened, if I even remember something that happened that day, it's like remembering someone else's memories and having no emotional attachment to them. So yeah. Another point, I wrote it down, so let me just look at my notes. But let me just rewind a little bit. So I did some intense physio. I did physio like 3 times a week. And this is after advocating for myself to my hematologist when I had a check-in. And I didn't know that I needed to, immediately start physio shortly after being admitted, discharged from the hospital. And so, like I said, everything was difficult. It was hard to breathe. It was hard to move. And I was scared to even try to do anything because I didn't want to disturb anything. And I was already in a lot of pain as well. So like, I didn't even have any guidance in that regard of, okay, Elizabeth, this is what you're doing, or, this is what you can do, or this is what you need to do at this level. Because with physio, it's not like you just start. They pretty much are supposed to meet you where you are in terms of your capacity. So, I had to learn how to walk again in terms of climbing stairs. I had to learn how to move again, and like mobility. Balance was poor, but it wasn't like so much disturbed. I definitely didn't trust the ground. So that was something that we worked on. And then just like chest exercises, and trying to expand my chest, so that it would become stronger, I would breathe better, and wouldn't be as constricted, because I need to like put my clothes on, right? I need to learn how to do certain things. At that moment, I was getting a lot of help from my family, specifically my mother. She's a nurse, just with like putting clothes on, feeding. Like I didn't know how to, or I couldn't feed myself. I didn't know how to feed myself. And even when I did learn how to do it, it was too heavy, you know? So yeah, I mentioned the just recovery process was very difficult. I was on I don't want to say a strict diet, but I pretty much had to eat like a diabetic, and I'm not diabetic. I had to have 5-course meals. So the main meals were, breakfast, lunch, and supper, and then 2 other, I wouldn't say they were actual meals, they're more like snacks, but each portion was very much regulated in terms of portions. So I wasn't eating a lot of heavy meals or large portions. It was like small portions just to help my body to heal faster. Everything was like shut down. So it's like I had to kind of kickstart the process of healing. And that meant, eating foods. For me, it was difficult to eat. So I really had to be fed, and that's difficult for me because I love to be in control. I'm not a control freak. I don't like controlling people, but when it comes to my life, I like to be in control. Aside from God being in control, I like to be in control of the things that I have control over. So I felt stripped away of my abilities and my capacity to do even the little things, and that was very difficult. So fast forward to my engagement. I need to also stress, when I say engagement ceremony. So I need to stress on the fact that, when someone goes through health trauma, or any kind of physical trauma, you're not the same. Okay. So what had happened for me was I was fluctuating in my weight. Like I would gain weight, I would lose weight. I would have inflammation, I would not have inflammation. So sometimes I'd wake up and most of the time I wasn't inflamed. But in the middle of the day, I'd be inflamed. And then maybe going to bed, I'm not inflamed. So, I need to stress that it was very difficult for me to live with this new reality because there's too many fluctuations, even in a single day. And so even on my engagement ceremony, I was told, why are you fat? I was fat shamed. And at that time, I had not disclosed, like my family and I had not disclosed to anybody what I was going through because it was like a silent battle. And to be honest, it was no one's business, number one. Number two, we weren't ready. I wasn't ready to have to explain myself to anyone because a lot of the time when you're going through a health trauma, it's already difficult to come to terms with what you're experiencing, let alone explaining it to people. And even when you explain it to people, if they are welcoming of what you have to say, then at least that's the first part. But when people choose to be ignorant, even after you explained it to them, it's emotionally draining, it's emotionally tasking, and I didn't want to experience that. I wanted to just be happy and get married, So yeah, I was fat shamed. And even on the day of the wedding, In the morning, it was so funny. I had the right measurements, everything. And within like an hour or so throughout the day, I lost so much water weight. And so my traditional attire was, my gown was like heavy and like loose on me. And it was so weird. But yeah, it still hurts because nobody wants to hear you're fat. But especially on the day that you're getting married to the love of your life, you shouldn't hear that from anybody. So, that wasn't nice, but that's something I did experience. Then fast forward to the following year, I had my white dress, white wedding ceremony. So that's where, the engagement ceremony has already transpired. But the white dress ceremony is a little bit different, where it's extended to not just family from both sides, but also friends. So that was a beautiful day. And I'm sad saying this because I don't remember it. Like, I don't remember it at all. I have glimpses of what happened, but even worse, I don't have an emotional attachment to it. So it feels like I didn't even get married. And so, sometimes people encourage me to look at the pictures and to look at or watch the videos. And I did, but I feel nothing. Like, so this is what medical trauma sometimes can do to a person. And it is recent. It was a few years ago. It's not like that long ago. But I do have short-term memory loss. And even for the things that I do remember, it's like I don't have an emotional attachment or connection to it. It feels like, okay, oh, that's me. Or sometimes I'll look at pictures and I'll be like, oh, that looks like me. And, my family will be like, yeah, that's you, Elizabeth. Like, that's you, And I'm like, oh, okay. Or I'll be like, that looks like me. And it's like, I can't relate. I can't identify with what I'm looking at and how beautiful the day is. I even recently watched the wedding video and it felt like watching someone else's, so yeah, that's some of the realities I go through, right? Sorry, I'm just looking at my notes here. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that, there are a lot of mixed emotions that I have. And this is still dealing with a pulmonary embolism. Like, I haven't even reached MS waiting to happen, So for a whole year, like I mentioned, I didn't work. I wasn't allowed to work. My job was to eat and sleep and just do physio. And that was difficult to do, but I got through it and I made it. And right now we're in 2024. So a lot of the time I find myself catching myself, kind of like doing the math, kind of, recollecting history or the past few years. I'll be like, okay, we're in 2024. So it means this is happening, or this happened so-and-so date. This is how old I am. Okay, this is what happened. Like, I'm looking at things like they're facts and a timeline, because from 2020 up until now, like, my memory is not the same. Who I am is not the same. A lot of things have changed. My memory is different, my recollection, but my wits, it's still there. So it's like medical trauma hasn't made me lose my ability to have high cognitive function. I'm still a nerd. I'm still like pretty typical about certain things. So I always say, like, who you are comes out even more after surviving or experiencing medical trauma. And who you're not is not going to be created. So, I have a psychology background, and we always learn that when you see certain things or experience certain things from people, don't say, oh, they changed. Psychology tells us that no, that's always been there, but sometimes situations or experiences kind of trigger the core of who you are to come out. Um, and sometimes it's not the core of who you are, but situations and environments and people and things can create certain things that exist in you to come out, even whether they're good or they're bad, positive or negative. So, yeah. I wanted to just say thank you so much for just tuning into my podcast and for hearing me out. This is very, I don't know, it's like I have mixed emotions because it's difficult to speak about this, but I feel like this needs to be out there. I wish I had someone who literally looked like me sharing their story. And when I was going through like just dark times and was in a hole and I felt so lonely, I wish I had like these videos to listen to. It doesn't solve the problem, but there is some sort of comfort knowing that these stories exist. There's someone who has experienced the exact same thing or something similar, and you're not alone. And so, that's why I'm inspired and driven to put these podcast episodes out there just to reach even one person. Like, I'll be okay. And even if you can't relate to anything I'm saying, just being a caregiver or knowing someone has experienced medical trauma, whether it's a pulmonary embolism or something else, or you're an ally, just having more information about these stories and sharing it with someone you even know so that they can have some hope. This is for you. I'm doing this out of my own volition. Like, it's not easy, but I feel like, in my intro video, I mentioned that this is beyond me. So it's very important for me to mention or share my story with the world. I'm definitely like behind the scenes. I don't like to be seen. I don't like to be at the forefront. So this is like very new for me. It's uncomfortable, but it's exciting. So I'm here for it. Thank you so much for tuning in and stay tuned for episode 5. Cheers.